Goblins, calling from every cave, crack, and crevasse you could possibly imagine. Today, we are visiting a budget version of the popular Goblins deck that has been running around the Modern format for a little while now. That deck is a toolbox deck mixed with a combo deck. Unfortunately, the combo side of this deck is very expensive, so we are going to replace that with a bunch of other shenanigans. This deck is going to be running in around $120 or 33 ticks if you're playing on MTGO, and, like always, if you stick around to the end of the video, there is going to be a way to upgrade this deck into that competitive version, and because I love you all, we're going to be doing a more budget version for anyone that doesn't have $120 to spend on a Magic deck. So, without further ado, let's get into Goblins.
You crazy mother...
Our first two cards are going to be Goblin Matron and Boggart Harbinger. These are the search for goblins that are going to be in our toolbox. They allow us to search our library for a goblin card. Boggart puts it on top of our deck, Matron puts it into our hand. We are running 4 of both of these cards because they are key to getting exactly what we need to beat our opponent. Our next two goblins are Goblin Warchief and Frogtosser Banneret. Both of these make goblin spells cheaper, which is great seeing how we're playing all goblins. And Goblin Warchief also gives our goblins haste, which can be very relevant when we want to dump our entire hand onto the board and then swing into our opponent's face. Our third set of goblins are going to be Goblin Ringleader and Rundevelt Hordemaster. Both of these cards give us slight card advantage, which is why we're running 3 of each of them. We would like to see them throughout the game. Ringleader allows us to reveal a bunch of cards, get goblins, which is good, and Rundevelt allows us to, whenever a goblin dies, we get to exile the top card of our library, and then we can play it until the end of our next turn. So we don't have to play it this turn, we can also play it next turn, which it's a card advantage thing. Both these guys are giving us card advantage, so we can draw more cards, play more goblins, win the game by swinging wide. The fourth set of goblins is going to be Mogg War Marshal, Pashalik Mons, it's a hard name to pronounce, and Sling Gang Lieutenant. These are all part of a package that creates goblin tokens for us, which is important because we want to swing wide most of the time, but we also give the option of dealing damage to our opponent when goblins die. In some cases, we get to sacrifice them to Sling Gang Lieutenant, so that's kind of a fun way of doing this as well. So a little bit of options here for that, which is very good. The fifth set of goblins we have is Goblin Bushwhacker and Battle Cry Goblin. Both of these goblins allow us to give all of our creatures haste and +1/+0. Goblin Bushwhacker, when you play it, you can do the kicker cost. Battle Cry Goblin obviously is that on a stick, which is very helpful. As you can see, we are playing less copies of both of these cards because we want to use these as our toolbox cards when we want to win the game rather than draw into more than one of them, because playing a bunch of them is not always the best case for us. And the final sets of goblins we have Spheric Prospector and Munitions Expert. Spheric Prospector allows us to sacrifice it to get a red mana, which can allow us to accelerate into things down the road. Munitions Expert is our way of dealing with creatures and planeswalkers as it deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of goblins you control. We are a goblins deck, all of our stuff is goblins, so you get the idea. And as you can guess, we're probably going to do it on our opponent's turn because the card has Flash, which is really handy for us when we need to swing in. As far as non-goblin cards is concerned, we only have 2 cards. We have Goblin Grenade, which allows us to sacrifice a goblin to deal 5 damage to any target. Yeah, this card is fantastic because it allows us to sneak in some ton of damage when we have extra goblins just kicking around and we maybe can't swing in. And the last card we have is Aether Vial, a card I generally haven't put in my decks because up until relatively recently, it's been a little bit too expensive to verify to have in a budget deck. Essentially, what Aether Vial does is at the beginning of your upkeep, you don't have to, you may put a charge counter on Aether Vial. And then you may tap Aether Vial to put a creature with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Aether Vial from your hand into play. So, you can cheat creatures in at instant speed, meaning you can do it on your bonus turn, you can do response to combat, you can do it whenever. So, Aether Vial, super powerful, definitely worth playing in this deck. And then moving into lands, because lands are an important part of every single deck, Blackcleave Cliffs and Dragonskull Summit are our lands that produce both red and black mana, and then we have 11 mountains and 4 swamps. Okay, it is time to talk about the sideboard. We have Damping Sphere Stone Rain to deal with strange lands that do strange things, Goblin Trashmaster and Smash the Smithereens to deal with artifacts and other stuff, Tomod's Crypt to deal with some graveyards, Munitions Expert, Tarfire, and Stings Kruger for dealing direct damage to stuff, Again, feel free to change the sideboard, whatever is making sense in your local meta, or if you're playing kitchen table Magic, don't put a sideboard in. You don't really need one. Realistically, if you're playing just with your friends, on some Saturdays around some beers at a pub, yeah, you don't really need a sideboard. That's not really what this thing's all about. Additionally, if you're still watching the video at this point, why don't you consider subscribing to Giant Monster Games so you don't miss any of the future content, seeing how there's plenty of stuff coming down the pipeline in the very near future, like in probably days from now, realistically. Okay, let's talk about how to downgrade this deck if you can't spend $120 on a deck. I understand. You can be bringing this deck down to $50 if you cut out the sideboard and you take out Aether Vial, Blackcleave Cliffs, and Dragonskull Summit. They are the most expensive cards in the deck. Aether Vial, obviously you can replace that with a couple more Goblin Grenades, and you can just fill out other goblins that are, only 1 outs or 2 outs or 3 outs. You can just put in a couple extra. As far as lands, because replacing good efficient lands is not always easy, which is why they tend to add up really quickly, there are a bunch of other lands out there that you can play that usually come into play tapped that give you some kind of bonus. We have Tramway Station, Temple of Malice, and Foreboding Ruins. Having lands that produce both color and mana is going to make the deck more consistent. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it'll also make you play 1 turn behind. Okay, now it is time to talk about the upgrade part of the deck, which I'm sure some of you guys have been waiting for. The main key piece to this deck is Conspicuous Snoop. Conspicuous Snoop is a goblin, and it has play with the top card of your library revealed. Very cool. You may cast goblin spells from the top of your library. Double cool. And as long as the top card of your library is a goblin, Conspicuous Snoop has all activated abilities of that card. Triple cool. So how do we actually spin this into an infinite combo? Well, for starters, we use Boggart Harbinger to search up and put Kiki-jiki Mirror Breaker on top of our deck. Because Kiki-jiki has a fun little ability that says, create a token that is a copy of target non-legendary creature you control, except it has haste, we can use Conspicuous Snoop to create infinite copies of itself with Kiki-jiki's ability. Once we have enough Conspicuous Snoops to heal to kill our opponent, so let's say 1 million, we can then use Kiki-jiki's ability one more time, on the very last one, to copy Boggart Harbinger. So when the Boggart Harbinger enters play, we get to search our library for another goblin and put it on top of our deck. We then search up Mogg Fanatic, which has the ability of sacrifice Mogg Fanatic, deal 1 damage to any target. We then sacrifice all of our Conspicuous Snoops, which have that ability now, and direct them at our opponent's face for the win. I know, very cool. The cards we're going to be taking out to make room for this combo is going to be the Goblin Grenades. They just don't actually do enough once we have the combo in play. The Goblin Bushwhackers, which we don't really need. And then you're going to be taking out some of the toolbox cards, just a random smattering of them. And then there's a number of very good land upgrades. There is Anit's Hovel, Den of the Bugbear, Cavern of Souls, all very good cards, and then Blood Crypt and Bloodstained Mire, format staples. And that's it. That's the entire Goblins deck. Go out and play it. Make sure you scream like a goblin when you do. Until next time, though, my name is Adrian. This is Giant Monster Games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon.